Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of All About My Wife, a South Korean romantic comedy from 2012 that stars Su-jeong Lim, Sun-kyun Lee, and Seung-ryong Ryoo. Now the film begins with our two lovebirds meeting during an earthquake. The sparks fly, and they quickly get hitched. 7 years later, they're still married, but this guy is completely miserable, despite the fact that his wife is still very attractive and cooks with passion. Now the big problem is her constant nagging and negative nature. This woman will just straight up yell at people, including her husband, all the time, over even the most frivolous things. So this guy becomes so frustrated that he contemplates asking for a divorce, but is still too intimidated by his wife to even ask for one. So he hatches a plan to pay someone to seduce his wife away from him, which will make the transition to divorce much easier. As one might expect, things don't go quite as planned. So first and foremost, this has an outstanding cast of leads. If you're going to get 3 Korean actors to star in like a love triangle film, this is about as awesome as you can get. So we begin with Su-jeong Lim, who has given excellent performances in the past in films like A Tale of Two Sisters, Lump of Sugar, Happiness, Ing, Come Rain, Come Shine, and I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay. Now this woman is an upper tier actress in my opinion, high upper tier in the South Korean industry, and it shows in All About My Wife because she practically revels in psychologically torturing Sun-kyun Lee's character. So much so that you basically agree with this man's decision to hire someone to seduce away his wife. I mean, near the beginning of this film, you're like, yeah, it's time to get away from this chick, dude. Time to get away. At the same time, however, as the film moves along, she eventually shows an endearing side to her character, and that adds some multidimensionality. Now next we have Seung-kyun Lee, who previously starred in some very impressive films, of course, like The Advocate, A Hard Day, Pa Ju, and a bunch of Sang-Soo Hong's films. Now, needless to say, he was born to play the disgruntled husband in All About My Wife. This guy's fantastic at playing a character who is in over his head and behind the 8 ball. You really sympathize with him, not only because of the seemingly tireless existence of living with his wife, but also the fact that he's got to deal with this unhinged ladies' man that he chooses to help him. And that brings us to the man, Seung-ryong Ryoo. Now, if you watched our top 20 Korean films from 2010 to 2017 video, and you should, it's posted on the Pieces of Work YouTube channel, you will know that this man has appeared in an insane number of high-quality films over the past decade. He's almost incomprehensibly reliable at picking high-quality scripts and movies to star in. And he certainly made a good decision with All About My Wife. He cuts loose in this movie. This is one of his more flamboyant performances here. He brings it. He's like a suave, Doseki-style, most interesting man in the world, Casanova type, who's actually burdened by all of the attention he receives from the opposite sex. There are some moments in this movie where this guy had me laughing hysterically. I really love this actor, and I'll watch him in anything. So yeah, this movie is basically worth watching for the cast alone. What about everything else? Well, actually, it's all rather impressive, I think. I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. The South Korean film industry is incredibly reliable at making quality romantic comedies. The primary romance in this film is developed very nicely and is multifaceted too. You know, this couple has their problems, some of which are caused by the staleness of their 7-year marriage, but all of the blame is not placed solely on the wife's shoulders, as you think it might near the beginning of the movie, because you eventually do see things from her perspective. And consequently, near the beginning of the film, you kind of want to see these two get separated, but by the end of the film, you really want to see them stay together, and that's good script writing. The comedy is also quite effective and portrayed in a variety of ways. This is not just a bunch of thoughtless slapstick gags thrown at you. There's nuance here, and there's character-specific humor that's created from like the scenarios and character traits. It's a lot of fun to watch. The only slight flaw that I noticed after rewatching this film for like the 5th or 6th time recently is that the runtime of 2 full hours does put a little bit of strain on the pacing during the final third of the film. However, that's kind of when the film cashes in on that character development and actually earns the romance part of the romantic comedy designation. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I watch a romantic comedy, there's so much emphasis placed on the comedy that the romance is flimsy. This is not the case here. The romance in this film is very nicely developed, and I think that really helps things. Gives it some depth. So I wouldn't consider that necessarily a flaw, because the film does use its full runtime to its advantage, but I could understand if someone thought this film was a bit on the long side. So yes, I highly recommend All About My Wife. It's moderately available on DVD. You can usually find some Region 3 DVDs out there with English subtitles floating around. And as always, I will see you next time.